People with cancer get radiation treatment, so how come space radiation does not help them, or does it? No. When people get radiation, right, that's targeted radiation. It's also, let's call it small field radiation, which means it is specifically designed to terminate the cancer, to disrupt the cancer. Now you have a amount of human cells also that will perish because of those treatments, right? Space radiation or galactic cosmic rays are high-speed particles, right? That's more like the Hadron Collider. Do you guys know that? So galactic cosmic rays are like a bunch of CERN tubes pointed right at us coming in. You don't want that. You're looking at high doses of gamma, ultraviolet, and all those different in the spectrum that's very harmful, can knock the nuclei right out of a cell. You don't want that. Cancer is nothing more than flooding, right, that cancer with high doses of radiation to kill the cancer and some friendly cells. But that type treatment is also mixed with other things. So it's you call it a specialized or local radiation. When you're receiving, you can't capture radiation, galactic cosmic rays, and then utilize them on a person, because those are high-speed particles. You can redirect them, right? But then you would. That's very dangerous for astronauts and everybody else. For example, if our ozone does not hold up in certain areas, and if the sun stopped its or held back its activities, right, all of us would begin to die off the same day, right? Because galactic cosmic rays would tear us up to pieces. We would become liquid within hours. That's what would happen with those high-speed particles. So we need the sun and its rays and solar flares and CMEs, and we need all that. And that holds back the galactic cosmic rays. It creates an effective bubble over the whole solar system. But one day that bubble's going to collapse. We won't have the protection from the sun, right? And when that day comes, all those high-speed particles are going to breach the protective sphere around the earth by the sun, and it's going to reach us, in which case part of the prophecy is going to be true in Revelation, when men were scorched by great heat, and they blasphemed God for that, right? Maddie says, do you think you are aware of a specific event coming from space that will fulfill a biblical prophecy? Yeah, I do. What is it? I likely won't discuss it. Here's why. There are certain things I'll never discuss. Number one, there's no context for it, right? And when there's no context, it becomes a point of argument. That's all it does. It won't yield any further understanding for anybody. It just becomes one of those speculative points at which people can argue. I had a dream one time, amongst other dreams, and you guys know I don't like dreams. I don't. But I had a dream one time, and I received some instruction in this dream. And there was always a figure in my dreams that would instruct me, and this is when I was tiny. I was little. And I would always listen to this person. This person seemed like it was just a very good nature around this person, but this person was very trustworthy, I would say. Anyway, I was instructed that you cannot show a blind man what you want him to see, right? You cannot speak to a deaf man and have him hear. They have to have their sight restored. They must be able to see. They must be able to hear, right? Can you imagine someone going up to a blind guy and says, hey, come here, I want to show you something? That's not going to work out, right? Without context, we are blind. Without some type of relation to the subject, we're not going to be able to hear it. The truth has been given to every single person on earth about several subjects. The problem is most of the people on earth cannot hear that evidence, because they're in a very peculiar state of mind. You've been shown the truth numerous times. But here's another truth. Because there's no context behind what you saw, it becomes nothing, right? If I were to discuss the specifics of an event without context, in other words, this one will take a bit of seeing, right? A bit of experience. It becomes one of those mute points. It'll become a subject of ridicule, right? It'll become a nothing conversation, right? Which is a wasted conversation, and it won't edify anybody because it's so far out of timing. It would almost be like if you were in the time of Adam and Eve and you began to discuss Revelation, that would be so far out of context for Adam and Eve, right? But in the end of days, which, by the way, is going to be so many generations far from you, Adam and Eve, that you just hold on to that. Well, see, the Lord has us know things that are useful that we're going to have to deal with, and he will reveal it to all the saints. There is nothing I can know that you don't know. That's impossible. It's impossible. And God will never give a truth in a secret place to just one of us, but reveals everything spiritually, right? Now, as we are exposed to more and more events in this world, all of us are going to be able to hear and see in a very familiar way. And we'll always be able to communicate with each other on a specific level, because the Lord does not have one person in which he bestows the entirety of the truth, but he reveals what he reveals by way of a spirit. So all partakers of spirit must house a truth before a truth is ever spoken. If somebody speaks prematurely, right, and people don't have a context, they can never verify internally that truth, therefore becomes just nothing, right? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. A lot of sense. What do you base your reasoning on when you say this is the last cycle? Well, this is the last cycle. It's one of those that points to what Jesus said. That specifically points towards what Jesus said. At no other time in the Bible did God say, this is it. No other time in the Bible. When Jesus spoke, and they recorded his statements in the New Testament, Jesus spoke to us, telling us, these are the last times. The prophets spoke of the Messiah coming in the last days. Now, the last days in the Bible and the last time literally means the last age, right? The last age. So in the last age, because Jesus spoke of this age, right? The prophets spoke of this age. They had issues in their own ages, but this last age, right, was just one of these renowned subjects that goes on in the New Testament. And Jesus continually told us what he did when he went to go sit at the right hand of the Father. That was fulfillment of the Old Testament prophets' sayings. Now, there's still a couple of more things that have to be fulfilled, but Jesus told us himself, these are the last times. And then you get to the book of Revelation, and when he says the time is at hand, we know we're dealing with an age. Now, listen, this is one thing. When you're dealing with an age, you're spanning multiple generations, right? So it means the first generation that came right after Jesus Christ, right? They did not see what we are seeing. They're gone. They didn't see what we're seeing, right? Within that age, you're going to have several generations. And then Jesus went so far as to pinpoint one specific generation out of all those generations. He pinpointed one. One that would see the fulfillment of prophecy. He pinpointed one. Are we that one? This is what people, this cycle is an age, right? This cycle is an age. So cycle is age and age is cycle. This is the last cycle because it's a cycle with the Messiah. No other cycle had the Messiah. Now, to make to make this go even further, I've also read the text from a lot of civilizations on Earth, and not one of them during their time spoke of their time being the absolute end, not even in the time of Noah, because there was always talk about continuing after the event, right? In other civilizations also, especially Native American civilizations, right? Egyptian civilizations, all of them spoke similar things. And I have, from reading, I have an idea on things. But these guys also heard the prophets. Do you know that? The Egyptians heard the prophets. They heard of the prophets. They know what the prophets spoke of, right? Moses there were some things written after Moses also who was not called Moses in Egypt. But they now know who Moses was in Egypt, and things were recorded of him too. And even his exploits after he left Egypt, that was recorded. But Pharaoh, after Egypt fell, after the destroyer came, after that city fell, Pharaoh went into the wilderness. And he began to write. He began to document things. He was searching out the living God, right? So even he concluded that he was in the worship of very dark and false gods. So funny. Native Americans used to prepare their children for the sky serpents, they used to call them, or the winged serpents, whatever you want to call them. In every single case, though, they have the same story, that these serpent things would come from the sky, mate with their women, they would have children. These serpent things would then come and take the child until the child was of a certain age, and then that child would come back, his eyes much brighter than everybody else's, his skin color much brighter than everybody else's, would come back and rule. And this is what some of the secret societies are based on, because they believe that the Caucasian, right, is part of the heavenly gene set, right? This is what they believe. The Caucasian is part of the heavenly gene set. Not necessarily, we're not talking about the angels, but a heavenly gene set. And they believe that there are markers or tracers. Well, they know there are. That's why they have all this DNA stuff. They're gathering up, kinfolk and seeing who's who. But in a Native American world, prior to America ever getting there, can you imagine having a blue-eyed Caucasian leader of Native Americans, right? I don't know why. They don't share that in historical books. They don't share that. But that's precisely what happened. From the Mayan king list, you have gaps of time before Quetzalcoatl came there, right? 1,000 years prior to that, there was another kingdom there. Same people, different leader. The leader was Caucasian. Every single case happened that way. And so that brings us up to this very day, when the gene pool right now, just about everybody carries a very unique set, or let's just say pairs of DNA, right? Just like God said he would not come back until he scattered the power of the holy people. And he meant the power of the holy people was in their what? What is the power of the holy people? To scatter the power of the holy people, what was he talking about? Nikki says the deeper tribes called blue eyes. No, that's recent. We're talking about in the basis of it. Now, they have political arguments, and believe me, when they start talking about blue-eyed devils, this, that, and the other, all that is politics. That's politics of one tribe not liking another, bringing up every reason they can to hate them, right? Mixing historical context with some political point. They did trade and everything else, and you had the Ethiopians and the Africans and another set of Africans, and then you had the Asians, and all these races began to fight one another to compete because they were very competitive, but they just could not due to culture, they couldn't really trust each other because they had a variety of different beliefs. And when your faith is not the same, that brings a lot of contention to the party. And so that's relatively, recent. Just like most of your major scientists say that the master gene, or everybody came from one African gene. That's what they say. And scientists hate to admit it, but that's the way it is. That's what they admit. Now, this is what they say. That's not necessarily what I believe. Not what I believe. I'm more in the biblical realm of things. I don't necessarily believe that. I know about some of the ancient races, and there were a group of tall, very tall, dramatic-looking people that came from the mountains and mingled in with the races. But can't you guys see it? And you're telling me that most people still cannot see how the races came about? It happens every day right before your eyes. Come on, ladies, who's a good cook? You know that if you mix certain ingredients, right, the taste is going to come out different. You could cook steak the same way, but season it with different seasonings and have a totally different taste, correct? Sometimes even a different look, even a different texture, right, based upon seasoning, based upon the method. So ingredients, which are on the earth right now, you start mixing them up, you come up with very specific things. Autistic children were spoken of 4,500 years ago. How about that? Cancer was dealt with 6,000 years ago. Cancer was. The description of cancer based, and then today it was exactly, in fact, there was even talk in certain documents during the time of Noah. One of the plagues was just like cancer before the flood. Before the flood, it was at its height. Right now, the world has a plague called cancer. It's really bad. Do you guys know that? It's very bad. Very bad. Very bad. Yeah, Eric, I do too. The book of Enoch, I do too. And they wanted to know, was Enoch from the angels? Because when he opened his eyes were lit up. He was light-skinned, right? Egyptians, by the way, were dark-skinned. They have the colored buses in there. Egyptians were not light-skinned. Egyptians were dark. They were dark, very dark, like super dark, right? And then the Ethiopians look like Caucasians with black skin back during that time. That was the funny part. But they have mixed everything up so bad, right, that if anybody began to tell the truth, you cannot see it because we've been so programmed to believe in different things. The look of a African versus a Caucasian. Would you be surprised to know that they are purposely reversed? That you learn about them, right? And they reversed how they actually look historically. And now there's no way you can tell a person the specifics of the ancient world without lying to them, telling them exactly what the books tell them. Because your context of an ancient African or an ancient Caucasian, right? They're totally different from reality. And they have totally messed people up. This is how history is actually hidden, right? And because because very few people are going to go back and go against the grain and dig up the truth, then that history is just lost, and whoever can speak the best, that's who people are going to believe. You're not going to go and investigate when somebody who's well-spoken uses all the correct verbiage and nouns and pronouns and adjectives and all this stuff when they start speaking, and you believe what they're saying. There's no need for you to check. You believe the validity of that individual. To you, that person has credentials, so why go check that person out, right? They call it vetting people, which is a joke. How do you vet a person anyway? What are you going to go find out? That's weird. I'm going to vet this person. Somebody said that to me once. We have to vet you. I said, well, I'll tell you what. You go find the worst person in the world, and there's my history. Let's go forward. Like John the Baptist, he said, what did you come out here to see? What did you come out here to see?